Welcome, welcome, welcome. You're about to witness a exclusive preview of The Citizen Developer. It's a podcast series breaking down AI and accessibility and how there's a whole industry, a whole market making money, building automation and systems within businesses, and they're doing so with no code. It's a really great movement. This is just a little preview of one of the episodes. Hope you guys enjoy.
Here we are, another episode, Citizen Developer. Super excited to be here. Amazing episode on the way. A lot of great value, great content. Jonathan, how you feeling today?
Today is going to be one of those days. It's the first time you're going to see some material that hasn't been out there before. New material. I've been doing live workshops with this stuff. So super, super excited. I'm here with the legend, Julian. How are you feeling?
Absolutely. Feeling amazing. Happy to be here, inspire, give knowledge. This episode is great for anybody who wants to land more clients with AI automations, anything just around AI, whether it's web development, design, etc. This episode is going to speak directly to you and just give you the frameworks to understand what goes behind it for sure. But just to get right in, let me go ahead, share my screen, just start breaking down, what we've discovered and what we're kind of happy to share with you for sure. Let me go ahead and share the window. I don't want to share the entire screen. That's going to look crazy. Here we go. We love Notion, but essentially there's a crazy thing going on right now where there's a huge gap in the market where deal sizes between, or go, wait, what's that?
Sorry, if you could zoom in just a little bit. I didn't want to cut you off.
Yeah, for sure. For that last time, I'm glad you told me that. I wanted to be super zoomed out.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there's basically just a huge opportunity right now in the market where deal sizes between $1,000 to $10,000, there's not enough people fulfilling that. And there's a lot of demand for it with those small businesses. And the reason I'm saying this is not just, a theory I kind of thought of. It's based on just actual market research and data that I've found. And so one other thing that I do is I have a product called The Vault, I'm not going to lie. And within that, I do a lot of competitor intelligence, a lot of research into the top AI agencies in the world. So I can see, and I kind of give people the ability to see
real quick. Tap the top left just to hide the sidebar, right next to the left arrow. You can drop, right there.
There we go.
Now you can get the full screen.
Literally. But yeah, I've just basically found a lot of different data on these top AI companies. And so basically one of the patterns I found is that their minimum deal sizes are usually pretty large. They're usually around 10K. Their most common project sizes are 50,000 to 200,000. Obviously, this is great for me because I can see, what is that next level up? What do I need to be specialized in? What do I need to understand? But one thing that I realized is that pretty much all of these AI agencies are the same. Minimum deal size, 10,000. Common deal size, 50,000 to 200,000. And so they're serving these venture-backed scale-ups. They're not really serving huge enterprise companies, but they're definitely serving enterprise companies. And so I just started realizing very, very quickly that essentially there was a huge hole for these smaller deal sizes. Let me go back to Notion.
Yeah. Yeah, while you're hunting there too, good note as well, the SMB market, when we say 1 to 10K, that's the pricing appetite in which they're able actually to buy tech that would advance their revenue. Those companies are often taking revenue anywhere below the 1 million mark. A lot of service-based businesses, anywhere around that point, a lot of the revenue goes into cost of operating, cost of goods. And that's what we're really looking at today.
Exactly. And the whole gist of it is basically there's a sweet spot here for nimble automation specialists to really be able to get in there and sell basically a lower version of these larger $50,000 to $200,000 projects, but then be able to obviously have the same quality because we can use the same technology. We can use the same AI as these bigger agencies. And so let me see what this one is. So basically, what I've also done within that product, the Vault that I talked about, I've done a lot of scanning of AI Upwork jobs. So basically, any job on Upwork that's tagged AI, just really been able to see what those look like too. And so once I really saw that there was an appetite of, just like you said, for those kind of mid-range jobs, it really all became clear. So like one example is that is like from scraping, I found this like go high level SMS chat agent expert. And so if you look here, obviously bigger companies, enterprises need the same type of thing. Like they also need, SMS chat agents, but these smaller S companies, like an Australian marketing agency, also needs it too. And so they're looking for like a go high level expert, somebody to build a conversational SMS chat agent, etc. This is obviously something that somebody self-taught can really handle. An automation specialist that honestly was at zero in terms of knowledge 3 months ago, if they're really putting a lot of work, you can easily fulfill something like this. And you can see the actual compensation for it. I mean, 25 to 65 hourly for 1 to 3 months. So even if we do the math on that, say it ends up being $50 hourly and it's 20 hours per week, 20 hours per week times 4 for 1 month, 80 times 50 is $3,000. So just that alone, that deal size is open and available. It's just a matter of truly being able to audit a company, see what they need, be able to fulfill. Because obviously on Upwork, you'll see some companies that are asking for it specifically, but you want to be able to do cold email. You want to be able to do cold DM to just reach out to a company and say, hey, I can do this for you. And I know you probably need it based on what I audited, et cetera. So that's kind of just like the gist of today's episode of, really being able to identify this gap in the market and just understanding like why this is gold. I mean, there's faster sales cycles. You don't have to go through a full board to get a project approved. There's clear ROI, which we're going to talk about later with Jonathan, how you can clearly be able to audit something and understand the actual return your automation can create. And then of course, once you create one, you're in the door. So once you create that first workflow, there's 5 or 6 more that you can start to ideate because you understand that business now. So the new skill stack that should really be focused on is not just being a developer, not just being somebody who makes automations, but somebody who is an auditor that can understand what opportunity is there in a company, be able to quantify the ROI, and then go and build it. So without further ado, I would love to pass it to you, Jonathan, to actually show people how they can develop this new skill for sure.
Absolutely. And what's really exciting, I won't do too much hedging on this next 30-minute workshop here, but I will say, without fault, out of the 12 times that I've conducted this live, 1-to-1, 1-to-3 kind of situations, light bulbs go off every time. So real quick, just to kind of bring you into the context of things, this stems from a culmination of writings focusing more so on not just business development, but what it's like to actually build something useful, of substance, and of quality. So I like to kind of begin these really with this, call it a prefix, a way to kind of showcase intent, right? Because making promise and proof, I want to be able to really deliver this. So too many people attempt to make up in words what they lack in substance. The goal is to become more so that we can say more with less words, to help people be of service, to do, and through affinity and partnerships that follow these kind of godly, faithfully patterns, the aim is not just to serve God and people please, but to please God by serving people, by providing something useful and prompting them to ask for understanding, to discern judgment, make sense of this stuff, and cut through the noise and really build something from the mind up. So yeah, just to kind of segue into it, let's take you into it. So today we're going to be going over 3 kind of core workshops, each of them between 5 to 10 minutes each. Has a bit of an interactive process. I'll start from the beginning. So let me just set my screens up here. Super amped for this. So the first one is called the faculty of the mind. So this stems from a, it's jumping around here because I have this open. This stems from an Earl Nightingale workshop. So Earl Nightingale, really big, head in esoteric kind of literature. Very much Think and Grow Rich. If you think it, you can kind of actualize it. There's books and books and books about this kind of concept. Where it comes into play today is we're going to be looking at how to make thinking models actually work for you and increase business revenue, and how to basically pull that off. So to begin, understanding what your mind has access to, what the actual thinking model can do. So within the faculty of mind, there's really 5 key components. So the first one is this idea of imagination and introception. So it's kind of the first key point, which I'm going to pull over here. And I realize copy pasting doesn't work well here, huh? You know what? You guys are going to see some lifetime drawings. They're not going to look pretty, but it's okay. We can do this in speed. So first one is imagination, right? There's a number of ways to basically describe this. It's the ability to visualize, the ability to see things and kind of actualize it within your mind without it happening in your immediate reality, right? That's stuff we're familiar with. Introception, less famous, not as well known. The best way to describe it is a quick little exercise I like to do. And what it is essentially understanding how well can you internalize and see things within your own body. So if you're open to it, Julian, let's do this. So if you're able to close your eyes.
Yeah.
Now take a deep breath. Count to 3 if you'd like. We're going to do 11 seconds. And in these 11 seconds, I want you to really focus and dial in on your mind and try to feel the heat in your hands. Now, for those watching, don't skip forward. We're going to count for 11 seconds. Now, I'm asking you to open your eyes.
Yeah.
Take a beat. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to talk through it a little bit more this time. So if you can close your eyes once again, take a deep breath, count to 3. Now, I want you to visualize one more deep breath coming in. And with that, you're pulling in heat that carries through your nose, down through your body, into your arms, straight through your forearm as you're focusing on your hand. And watch as that heat kind of grows and burns a bit brighter, gets a little bit warmer. You kind of feel like the palm is holding the sun almost.
Literally.
So now count to 11. You can open your eyes now.
Yeah.
So A, B, which one did you feel more heat on?
B.
Why so?
Like I was generating the heat and then it was kind of transcending through my body for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it was almost a combination of imagination and there's a term called imprinting, which is just basically using language to kind of convey a feeling. Introception is really cool because in real time, your mind is being as present as possible. It's an exercise that tons of breathwork coaches, tons of people do. There's a real purpose to bringing that into the equation.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of bridge here between these two and the next 3 is something called focal vision. So focal vision essentially is focus vision. It's how you use your mind's eye to kind of make sense of the world and see things and understand things. So if you're able to, for a moment, look at the faculty of the mind as a function of, serving the world in some sense, right? And we don't have to dive too much into the philosophical gambles on that, but if your mind exists to actually contribute, there are 3 core things that it focuses on that does it. First one's memorization. So when you carrying on, if you're cleaning, if you're gardening, if you're doing something that's not so mentally intensive, your mind is often having flashbacks. It's often going places. It's remembering different things that are happening. When you wake up in the morning, the first thing you do is figure out what you're going to do next. You start to prioritize. You start to figure out, I got to go to the washroom. I got to go do this. I got to, take out the laundry, all that jazz. And then the next piece is anticipation. You kind of know what comes next. After you feel like I misspelled that. No, I didn't. After you basically, you're going through your things. You're also looking at, okay, this evening I'm going to cook that chicken. I have to make sure I marinate it. I'm doing projects. I have to visualize what it's going to look like on the client side. Talking to somebody, I have to make sure I understand how they're internalizing what I'm saying. I'm trying to visualize the future. So you can kind of see the layers on that. The component that we kind of work with, right? So this kind of happens on autopilot. For us, the manual piece is the how and who. The how is the actual execution. It's like the step-by-step, what do I need to do? How do I actually execute on this? And the who is how you see yourself in this equation. So the story of self, kind of an ego conversation, was one we can dive endlessly on an additional 30 minutes for. But it's good to keep this in mind. We're going to refer back to this concept a few times, so it's going to be able to dig in real soon. So how does this kind of work in the realm of AI? So I can guarantee, we went over this a few times. Actually, you know what? Let's do the power of this.
Oh.
We'll zoom in, walk through one by one. Because as I try to, yeah, this is fantastic. So when we look at an assembly line, right, we often feel that when we talk to any sort of artificial intelligence, it's like this black box. We're sending it something raw. We're sending it some sort of unstructured, jumble of words, instructions, some idea that we think we have. And we just kind of trust the black box to do what it needs to do. What actually happens is the thinking model is using its mind to enrich, to categorize, to basically remember what's happening, to remember how to score. It's evaluating, it's auditing, it's processing. A good term I threw here is personalizing, which is basically how can I make this, the thinking model is thinking, how can I present the response to make sense for you, right? So it feels more conversational. That's where that kind of effect comes in. The body of that actually exists as software. So for us, no-code automation, AI agents, things like that, software, there's a number of them we just went through. Notion, like there's these ways that we stack software to present information to people. That's pretty much the glue. The soul, which I can guarantee is kind of the most, not kind of, I would say without fault, ever since I've kind of come across these concepts, missing from a lot of the artificial intelligence conversation. There's a concept called transgression, which is basically how do we pass the point where this feels quote unquote impressive or like, wow, I didn't expect it can do that. And a lot of that comes down to perception. So I'll give you a quick little kind of anecdote as I pull this up. Here, can you see that or is it just the window?
It's just the window right now still looking at Excalibur.
Okay, let's fix that. So yeah, there's a quick little story here. I remember I was on the subway and like I would hear these like high schoolers talking about ChatGPT and they were like, yo, I don't know how you can trust it. Like that's a ChatGPT recipe, you know what I mean? Assuming like it's a bad recipe or it's like a false one or like a fake one, right? And the other kid was like, yeah, but I got a 90 because of it. So it's like, if it's fake, like how are you actually using it to have that sort of advantage? Here's a few examples of how I've done that in my practice. So there's a few different playbooks that I've kind of trained a project on, and it helps me basically speed track a lot of the things I need to do in terms of research, fact checking, seeing, basically verifying I can actually do something. If I'm looking at a different market, call it a niche, a specific group of people, I try to capture that into basically a playbook that I can reference in like a one shot that tells me as much as I need to know, right? So it's like a prospecting playbook. This is really helpful because it gives me an idea of a total addressable market, right? Buying power, appetite, revenue, if I'm able to feed that in here, basically giving me a sort of lead score, all that scoring piece, right? Like really evaluating if I can help somebody. So what I'll do later on too, I'll show you how that this component is the research component. The next piece here, and which I'll show you guys in a live demo in a bit, is PitchFrame. So PitchFrame, I probably should verbiage better on that, but it's basically how I like to present demos and pitches, right? There's 1,000,001 different playbooks and frameworks that you can use right now watching this that you apply in your sales process. BANT, for example, budget authority, needs and technology, I think is what that one is. Medic, there's some of these like different frameworks that you pick up from sales. If you have a mentor that gives you a process, any sort of framework where you consistently go through operations, that's where this comes in play. That's where the soul is, right? Because now you can achieve the same thing in a fraction of the time. So this pitch frame here is how I present demos. Gives me a nice little script, written proposal, and a kind of deal ready CTA. Helps me kind of get a basis, a skeleton, right? One last one I'll show you. Very, very fresh one. Alex Ramosi is coming out with a money models book August 16th. There's a free promo. As soon as I saw that, I'm like, okay, interesting. So this here is still going to be refined, but essentially this is how he pitches offers in the sense of pricing frameworks and understanding, how can we position return on investment and how can we get what we're offering paid off, or how can we generate the company enough money to pay for it and have a rationalization. So there's a lot that comes into that, a lot that you have to kind of chew through and make sense of. But by having the soul piece and all the other components in, you essentially get less noise. You get a bit of clarity, right? Diagnose, design. Like, it gives you a basis that you can build a lot on. And you can, much better than any sort of automation template, apply frameworks. And you have a number of these existing in your life. It's not as, you don't need to find it to copy paste, but you need to find it to internalize it, to see how it works. And then ask GPT, hey, can you help me create a playbook memory for this? So yeah, I threw a lot there.
That's I was can I interject real quick? So if I'm basically an AI entrepreneur that's watching this right now, and I want to create this for myself because, I want to basically be able to, like you said, cut down on the back and forth with GPT if I'm trying to research a niche or pitch somebody or even give them an offer. How can I create this myself? Can you kind of give me like the high level look at how to do that?
For sure. So give me an example of a sales framework that you've learned over the years, even a marketing framework, something that is a principle that has stuck with you.
Yeah, that's a good one. Let's see. Probably a marketing framework. Let me like
framework playbook. I can even keep it as generic as this because you're already going ready to search, right? You have an option here of doing deep research and kind of ideating on this. This is the research component. For our sake and purposes, just for demo, say you've done the research, you've ran that actual prompt and it went through it. It's going to ask you details about, what kind of, I see it already references the previous ones. So in some ways it'll ask you like, well, how do you want the playbook presented? And you can provide it structure. You can basically build it from the ground up, designing the structure. So
while it's doing that too, I'm curious. Well, I guess it'll show exactly what it is basically. And also I'm curious to know like how you actually entered PitchFrame, OfferFrame, and Niche App into your GPT for it to have that memory remain there and be able to.
I'll make one fresh right here and show you.
I love it.
Do it live. Let's see what happens here. I think what it's trying to do is combining a whole bunch of already existing ones, but realistically, again, you can feed it. There's articles if you look up, you know what, I almost want to do that. Like if you go top marketing.
Yeah, like the 7 Ps, product, price, place, promotion, people, process. That's a very mainstream marketing one for sure.
7 Ps, principles into this and help me. Basically, what is this trying to achieve here? Blends strategy. He's just trying to shortcut strategy essentially, right? So this one's helping me combine a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah, help me develop message architecture, which can feel like an ocean for people, but realistically, like here, you know what? Let's do it fresh. We'll do fresh. So create a marketing playbook framework for the 7 Ps.
Before you enter that, let's do this just like so we have it for YouTube and hooks wise. Can you just explain super high level, even the 1 to 2 sentences, what actually is a playbook? Just so people can like have the definition before you go into it.
For sure. So a playbook is frame it like this. When you're talking to somebody, even now in conversation, there's only a certain number of words they can say before you lose the idea, right? There's only a certain amount of sentences they can provide before it becomes lost in context. A playbook takes that into context and it tries to capture all of the quote unquote value, all of the quote unquote, without saying value, another trite way of saying it, all of the gems, all of the juice, basically everything that you need in a snapshot, in a body of text that you can actually apply over and over and over without having to re-explain and re-go through everything again and again. So yeah, that's a playbook. Did that make sense? Did I kind of detail that?
Yeah, it makes sense in terms of like reusable playbook and toolkit that you can use.
Yeah, like a real-time playbook, like mentors will pass on like their little notepad and be like, this is the wisdom. You're just creating another version of that and you're just digitizing it.
I love it.
So yeah, this one was able to cook it up within 8 seconds. And now just to kind of show you how I remember it, You can name it whatever you want. I like my notation to be like the word frame, because framework, playbook, that kind of thing. But like, you can really name it anything. This one's got all these different awareness pieces. So this helps for like, kind of figuring out execution and measurable impact. For me, like, I always look at things for utility. I don't just like to create it for creation's sake. So for me, I'm like, adjust this so I can use it in my pitches when connecting to a company. So I actually have real utility out of this. Otherwise, I'm just asking GPT to remember it for nothing. You got to dust off the playbook shelf, essentially.
For sure.
Yeah.
And so once this is created, are you putting this into a new doc and making it into a PDF and then uploading it into your, essentially like when you have the GPT folder, those kind of files, the knowledge base they have there? Or how are you making sure GPT remembers it so you can apply it for later?
You could, if you have a paid version, you have access to projects. That's the approach you would take.
Yeah.
If you have a free one, this function still works in the free one. So I'll show you how it works, because free GPT still have memories. Export all of this in one markdown window and save it as a memory titled, I don't know what this is. P-frame's kind of weird. Principal frame. Let's go with that. See if we'll use that. And all you have to do is just ask it to save it as a memory. That's a simple prompt. Really, I just go remember this, and then I just paste everything. You can do that in a free one. You could attach it as a document. Doesn't matter. Generally, it will remember. Doesn't matter what language model you're using as well. If it has memory, that'll work.
Love it. Yeah. I know some people kind of just do it like the lazy way of like, hey, remember this, but it's good that you're like, actually like export this, save it as a memory. These are good things just to remember so it doesn't get lost in the shuffle in any way.
Yeah. And for people that aren't familiar with Markdown, it's this format. Heading kind of broken down, hashtags, like it's just one pager stuff.
Yeah.
You don't have to do that, but like it's here, and yeah, it saved it. Perfect. So now all I got to do, new page. What is the principal frame button? And now you should be able to do it. Yeah.
Love it.
There you go. Quick fire marketing playbook. One sentence clarity on what you're solving, core pain points. Yeah. And again, you can butter this up to any sort of presentation style you like, change the tonality, as many adjustments as you like. It's very possible. That's it. All that in one shot. So yeah, that's playbooks. Are you excited for the next part?
I love it. I'm excited. I honestly want to see too, basically, now that I understand what playbooks are, how to create them, how did that apply to the body, the mind? Like, how did that kind of conclude everything that happens within a model?
So if you can imagine the process of baking a cake, right? I'm going to use baking bread because I actually know how to do that. Basically, you're taking the dry ingredients, the raw data, the unstructured stuff. You're putting it into the bowl with all of the, actually frame it like this. You're getting all the dry ingredients, and then the mind is all the wet stuff, all the different kind of, sauces and whatever else you're putting into it. Probably not doing sauces for bread. Terrible example. But you get the idea. Water, milk. That's the idea. Milk's not sauce. But anyways, you put them in, you mix them together, and the body is now the bowl where it all actually sticks together. There's that binding agent that's actually working, starting to actually get together. Then you let it sit. And then the soul of that bread becomes the dough that you then send into the oven. Say, hey, we don't say, hey, we try to get consistency. You moisture, put moisture in the bottom, that kind of stuff. And your output is bread. That's less noise, has all the ingredients, has all the magic you need. It's kind of this assembly line. That's the best way I look at it.
I love it. I love it. So if you're basically taking in, like if the raw data was, a company's CRM data or something, or customer data, the mind is enriching, scoring, personalizing it, etc. And then from there, once you have all that data that's now enriched, you're bringing it to a make.com. You're bringing it to somewhere like that. But once it is automated in a sense and then put into the output, before you just put it straight into like a Notion or a spreadsheet, you go through that soul process. You go through that playbook, PitchFrame, etc. So the output is clean, organized, and not just, regurgitated from the first step. Okay.
Yeah, otherwise you get a Notion graveyard that looks like mine, where it's just like hundreds of headings, hundreds of subfolders of all these different pockets and different things, and it gets to become a mess. Those are bodies without souls. You know what I mean? Like a soul is actually alive and a living concept that people work with day in and day out. I use NicheNet, PitchFrame, OfferFrame almost weekly. Ever since I make them, that's why I make them, because I use them so often.
I'm assuming you're using them for like if you have a new prospect, if you're trying to pitch. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, when I tell people I have an assembly line for pitching demos, this is what that is. This is finding what's coming in raw, what needs to be done, and then how does that get presented back to them.
Yep. Love it. And on the next episode, we'll be going just like full in depth with that full pitching and demo process that Jonathan goes through. So that'll be definitely one you don't want to miss if you're watching this for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So even right before that as well, the next component is going to dive a bit more in the technical side. This has been theoretical at this point. You know, if you're a fan of Earl Nightingale, you're probably happy. If you're not a fan of it, you're like, okay, so like, where do I make money with this? Calm down. We're almost there. The next stuff here is a second workshop that really dives into software architecture. So the reality with software architecture is there's a number of ways to kind of walk through this. Again, if you've been in IT for any stretch of time, you're probably familiar with how full stack software works. You know, there's a front end, stuff happens in the middle, and then it gets stored for longevity in the back. For as long as time has been, software has existed just by single user, question, talking to the software. They usually talk to this interface, and then something happens in the middle called business logic, where code like scripts are running, things are being figured out, right? Which we'll dive into. And then after that, like it's stored in some memory for some long time retrieval, right? This is great for like, you know, if you have below 100 users. Once you kind of cross that threshold, depending how you set all this up, things get a little muddy because information gets tangled. A lot of people, they're sitting in front of this toaster. And I'm sure we had this experience whenever you're working with new or old software, old tech. And it's just like, it's moving so slow. It's a dinosaur. This is dinosaur territory.
Absolutely.
Where we're at today is really interesting. I would say most modern software companies, firms, whatever you want to call them, operate like this. So they have a user reaches out with a question, right? They want to use it. And now, instead of talking just to one running system, they talk to people. So they have a product team. They have a sales team. They have a marketing team. These lines represent people, teams, social capital, management. You have somebody that's responsible for making sure the business logic works. You have someone that's responsible for making sure the longevity and the auditing and the financing works. You have all these different components of the business model. Now, why do I strike the chord of business model? It's important to understand in the context of AI and no-code automation, stuff that we do as a citizen developer, we operate using something called microservices. So microservices is a really interesting piece. So right now, instead of reaching out to a front-end developer, people are starting to see that Bolt.new. There's tons like Quad Code, like all these
Lovable.
basic, lovable. All these things can now create full front-facing interfaces. And that scares people, but they don't realize is like, yeah, sure, you can generate one, but they're also pretty buggy and broken and like still kind of like old.
Archaic.
You still need an element of social capital. But the difference is you don't need 4 full like front end people working on it now. You can now basically one person can do the work of 10. So with that, people should be empowered in the sense of like now they can create multiple projects given the runway to do so. What does that runway look like? So if you're just servicing that one stream, it becomes a micro kind of interaction, if you can imagine that. You're purely responsible just for that. The business logic is an example of like somebody saying, this is what they want the software to do, right? This is why, essentially, this is the core, the main point of why they buy a software to begin with. People buy Airtable to organize their records. People buy, throw out another software at me. Stripe for payment processing. Well, that's kind of a, that's a tough example. Blanking on every software I've ever known. Google Drive, people pay for that for storage, right? That's the logic. That's why they want it. Riverside, people pay for that for middleware processing because, you know, if a computer lags while we're recording, it's a problem. That logic, that's the intersection between IT and I would say the marketplace. It's how do you actually achieve change in real time and through real experience. And on the back end, similar to the front, is you can run with a Supabase, clerk.com, all these tools that automatically organize things for you. However, you still need the aptitude to figure out how to make those things work. However, you can now still do that with no code. So the barrier of entry is significantly less, which is something I'm really excited to talk about here. So I threw a lot of technical stuff there. Is there any questions on that before I start throwing numbers at you?
Before the numbers, I would love for you, just so we have the soundbite, for you to kind of introduce what this is. Because I know you talked about like, this is a technical point. There's people who want to learn about making money, but just like that one sentence, two sentence of like, these are what these three things break down and why microservices XYZ.
Okay. I'm going to mark this because I'm going to do my best to swing the bat.
Yeah.
When it comes to no code, AI and automation, let me frame that again. Let me try swinging that again. Real money is made at the intersection of actually bridging tech into the hands of people that need it. The way that's done now is through speed. Before, in order to create a software that can actually impact and change people's lives, it would take you months, sometimes years. And for some people, if you're a one-man ship, believe me, I know, it can still take you months. And that's okay, because what takes you months now used to take other people years. And what takes you weeks and days now are still taking people like weeks. Like the difference here is that a lot of companies are looking at the capacity of software to change things and still viewing it in the timeline of old software. So now microservices empower us as quick build and sell to deliver a product in 2 weeks that will actively impact revenue significantly quicker than a 4-month project. The second point, this isn't 60-second soundbite, but I tried, is the cost. The cost is significantly cheaper. To hire social capital, to hire a full team, just like you showed, that's why their minimum ticket is 10K, because they have to pay 5 different salaries. When you're building microservices, these systems operate almost on cents, if not dollars. Like it does not cost a crazy amount to operate. That's one of the reasons it's so powerful. I'm going to have a few more sound bites. I'll try. But how did that sound? Did that kind of like...
That was really amazing. I just know that like when we transition topics, we're going to need like that kind of like 1-2 liner. So that's perfect for it for sure.
Okay, I'm glad. I swung the bat. All right. Gave it a shot. Let's see. So the next point here. So frame it like this. When I talk about opportunity, there's a concept called total addressable market. This is essentially the total amount of people that you can work with in a given market. You can silo this into industry. You can silo this into region, type of business, however you'd like. For the sake of this kind of conversation, it's very generic, very high level. For 2025, we're at approximately 8 billion in terms of no code microservice development, right? So the reason why I focus on no code is that speed component. When people hear no code, a few things happen in their minds. They're like, okay, so is it less like not software? Right? It feels like is it fake meat? Is that what this is? And the reality is like, it's actually healthier, because when you have full stack architecture, and you have less than 100 users, you have a truck to get from one driveway to the next. You just need a bike. That's the difference. Microservices are bikes. They're small vehicles, small things that essentially achieve 5 features, not 30, and charge you just for the 5. And they don't charge you repeatedly. You can, but most of the time it's just a setup fee that's affordable and accessible, and it makes the business more money. That market, being at 8 billion back in 2025, is projected to go to 20 to 25 billion in 2030. That's an insane growth, over like 58%, if I can do the math here, or Yeah, like this just, it's insane to kind of see the growth that it can go to. The adoption rates, people are starting to see the actual impact of it in real time. One of the key points here is like I mentioned, the speed, scalability. I can deploy, like I mentioned, a cold email system or a lead generation system in 2 weeks, not 6 months, right? You talk to any enterprise company, and I won't name drop, but if you talk to any of them and you pay that 10K fee, you're still going to wait. They have to get an account executive, run a full audit, run a full thing. Whereas you can, as an individual, say, hey, I can do the audit. What does that look like? Talk to the key stakeholders, have the interviews, and we can, again, we'll dive into that.
Yep.
But being able to be thorough democratizes it. It puts the power back into the hands of the citizen, right? These citizen developers, which is always a key little point. Right now, there's a number of tools that support this. Make.com, all these other ones that empower you at next to no cost. Like, this is one of the cheapest business models to actually build. The only hill is truly knowledge, in the sense of like, how well can I implement what I know? And it's not knowing the most. Like, there are tons of, are you kidding me? There's so many smart developers, the talent out there in the market, insane. Like, but at the same time, the cost that companies face, salaries are not expensive. I've been laid off 4 times in a year back in 2024. I know that when it comes to supporting people, it's heartbreaking when you can't afford them. And they feel some ways too, because they're like, you promised me this whole vision, and you know, people never lie. And it's like, all right, well, they tried, they didn't lie, but their trust issues start to cultivate. And again, I'm not going to speak down rather on any companies that, I'll frame it like this without the spite. I'll be candid because it's you. I feel it's more empowering to have access and capabilities in the palm of your hands than depend on some higher up to give you instructions to tell you how to do that. If you can yourself figure out how to use the tools and use the crazy ocean of opportunity that is AI to actually advance and speed things up and improve the business in a very tangible way that you can measure, like, do it. And ask for forgiveness before permission in that sense. Again, don't take that to heart, but like, depends where you're at. Don't make your managers angry.
I see the episode easily. That's really one of the best ones for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Like, you gotta, it's the power of a citizen developer. And this is kind of part of the heart. And I'm interested to hear your take on this.
Yeah.
As a citizen developer, 5 years ago, I was scared to open up a terminal. I can't look at Python properly. I'm like, I see code. I see, it's hieroglyphics. I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm looking at. When I started to look at like, all right, what is the code doing? What is the logic behind this thing? Like, what am I actually achieving? What is the purpose of this code? And if I have that, I am able to have conversation about it. Natural language is now my coding language.
Bingo.
And then it's just, that's the power of no code, is now I can use my words like spells and cast them to actually create. So yeah, I'm interested to hear how being a citizen developer before and after is kind of how that frame has come to be for you.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it right on the head of the ability and the capability that's now there, because basically all coding is just a specific skill set to write in a computer's language. But the actual thing behind it, the logic and what the code is actually creating, that's just reasoning. That's just the ability to say, I want this API to connect here. I want this Notion database to trigger this action and GPT to do this. That reasoning ability should not just be held by people who can code, people who are marketers, people who are salespeople. They also have that ability to reason and say, I want to create an automation and a script that can do this lead gen, that can do this lead enrichment, that can take, this full database of 1,000 leads in LinkedIn, take all their personal LinkedIn URLs, analyze it, and then create a hyper-personalized message. Like, that ability to create and ideate that automation should not just be reserved for people who know how to write in a computer's language. So this resurgence of the citizen developer, people like us, would not have that ability, is beautiful, because now we can create these tools, these microservices that can impact everybody and help people. That's why you're going to see so much innovation happen, because now everybody at least just people who have that reasoning ability can now write in the computer's language using natural language. So it's a beautiful time to somebody who's just naturally curious.
That
For
part,
sure.
yeah, that was a gem. That was golden right there. If you have the capacity to imagine, if you have the capacity to look within and to look out, and you have the capacity to remember things, to discipline, at least to a bit to prioritize, and to visualize and anticipate, you have the power to build with no code as a citizen developer, which is the most empowering thing to hear. And something I wish I heard earlier on, you know what I mean? I looked at these things and the inner nerd in me was like, oh, cool, a new tool, a new little tech, new game for me to break. You know what I mean? Like I remember it's almost childlike. Like when I was smaller, I would pick up a console, a new game, and I'm like, how can I jailbreak this? How can I break this game? And in the same way, when I pick up all these things, I'm like, I was one of those guys that like when ChatGPT came out, 2022, December, in March of the following year is when I picked up no code. Like as soon as I found it, I was like, I'm never putting this down because a lot of people don't know about this. And I trusted that time will reward that. And now here I am 2.5 years later, I'd say, just like looking at ways to document and relay these ideas. Every workshop that I've done conveying what this is lands on people and they're like, oh my gosh, wow, light bulbs, right? Like, oh shit, there's so much I can do. Where to start? And that's kind of the next point. But before I dive there, is there anything else you wanted to kind of harp on with this?
No. Keep going for sure.
Beautiful. So how does AI and automation, microservices specifically, make a business money? So there's a few examples of this. Like I mentioned, one of the core differences is like we're not building full software architecture in our work. We're often just building small features, I would say. So an example of this, quick little project I recently finished, was for a sales director at a tax firm. And if the editor, I don't think it shows names, but if anything, it'll be a shout out to them. They see these. Right. But I'll go name drop. Timberline Tax, fantastic company, honestly. Really cool working with the sales director there. I was able to finish 29 projects for him off of Upwork when I first discovered him. He was looking for coaching for AI. It's not actually what he wanted. He actually just wanted someone to help him, because what happened is he had somebody that he hired, and they built all these things for him, and then they disappeared. They never explained how any of it worked. And him looking at it was like, this is a whole learning curve. I have 4 teams to manage, 14 sales rep. I don't have time to learn this stuff. But he's a smart guy, so he's like, maybe I can. So entering the conversation, the relationship, I was like, we have 2 options. I can build for you. I can build with you, right? And we did a combination of both. So with that, I was able in the first month to finish 29 projects for him, just knocking them out of the park, which was great. I was just really focused on doing a good job. And the next month, he was excited about that, but he was like, maybe it was a fluke. I don't know what went through his mind. He was like, let's keep it going. I have more stuff I want to build. And he started to pull out of his back of his hat. He's like, this is a project from months ago. We spent 4-6 months on this thing, couldn't get it to work. One example was he had his sales rep sending individual Google Meet invites to follow up, essentially, right? What I was able to do was to basically build a scenario, which you see is now running every day with thousands flawlessly, no problem. All it is combining essentially 2 automations together. So I'll walk through this really quick, just to kind of glaze over it. So what happens, Monday.com, it watches the column and it says, hey, once we see an update, someone changes a column, they're going to list that specific board and they're going to pull all the sales rep information. Right? They're going to get the name of the person, basically, when am I supposed to follow up with them? It gets all that stuff. The second automation here is something called a scheduler spine. Now this automation alone has made me, I want to say anywhere between $2,500 to like $4,000, and I'm just re-implementing it across. I did it 3 different times.
Yeah.
All it is essentially converting meetings, like timing wise from a card, like a previous like input. I'll show you another example. And then calculating that meeting inside make.com and then sending that to Google Calendar. So how that works is really cool. So it pulls the stuff from the card and then it goes ahead and it calculates essentially date plus time. So it creates a little format for me. I then do a time zone correction where based on the client, based on wherever they're, wherever they're at, I would change this time zone to fit them. So it's really just a small tweak. And then I would convert the format, right? So a whole bunch of jazz happening here. Pretty much setting the start time. I would then calculate the distance for how long the actual meeting was. In this case, it was 4 or 5. So 5 hours, I would assume, or 5 minutes, because it's just a full 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Yeah, it's not an actual thing. Then for end time, I would just add basically that to the previous thing, breaking down 5 minutes from the start time. So now I actually have a full length. I then add a little sleep module because Google Calendar and the volume that's coming through here will freak out.
No rate limiter, yeah.
Exactly. So that's what this is, 60-second delay. And as well as it catches errors. I also get email notifications too. But what this was able to do across 14 sales reps, they were doing 300 to 400 outbound calls. This small microservice implemented, they were able to do 700 to 800 calls a day. Before it was 300, 400.
Yeah, literally more than 2x their output.
Just with one like small tweak, just the ability to, instead of having to open a new tab, open my calendar, find the time and click, it could just change a column and it would detect your email, your sales rep, whatever it is, and automatically send it.
Yeah, the power of this is like one of the most beautiful examples of what a microservice is, which is just basically these small features that can improve output dramatically, but can easily be built by one person versus needing a whole development team that you have to pay 20 engineers to do.
Facts. And this is the exact same thing. So I did it from a Trello instead of Monday.com. Someone changes the Trello board, it would start to calculate the meeting length, and it would just go through it. It would calculate everything step by step and add it together, get the invitee, send the invite. Once for me to first figure this out the very first time, took me 2 weeks. Every time after that was less than 2 hours to deliver. And it became one of those levers I keep pulling. And I still continue to pull it. I'm happy to share it and kind of map it out with people. People still struggle with this because when you jump from one software to the other, time zones, everything gets lost.
Yep.
So yeah, pull back this here. That's one example. The other one was really cool. One of my highest paying projects is a Medicare one. I'm going to ask the editor to hopefully blur a lot of this because...
So like API keys or something?
No, but client information.
Okay.
I think it's just the bottom left, the settings side. Just going to blur that. So Retail AI is an enterprise level, very similar to that beam. Basically allows you to build out these conversation flows. And you get to deploy these voice agents. You can either call upon, we could do a whole separate video on just on voice agents alone. I've built 14 of these. I have an enterprise deal on my table right now with a brokerage, which is really insane. I'm building a cold calling voice agent for a broker of record that's supposed to be funded into a full software architecture build out, which is insane to actually say out loud because I remember when I built my very first voice agent, I achieved the success of hearing a human sounding voice at 2 a.m. and there was nobody around me. And I was like, you ever seen Pursuit of Happiness? It was like the moment the light bulb actually went. I was like, okay, this might be my arena. This might be what I do. And ever since I've obsessed over the quality of how I can pull this off. So real quick story on this one. Medicare provider based in Philadelphia, or at least one of their clients was based in Philadelphia. They had essentially a bunch of people above the age of 50 calling. They'd wait 3 to 4 hours for anyone to pick up. It was a call center kind of vibe. And they heard about voice agents. So this guy, one of the directors, was in the retail support channel for Discord, basically just responding to people, trying to figure out hey, does this tool actually work? And I posted something about, just finished a project, and something like that. And he DM'd me and he's like, can I hear more? I'm on a call with him. He's like, this sounds phenomenal. can you do this for us? And I was like, yeah, sure. And he's like, yeah, most people have quoted him for like 10 to 15K for this kind of build out. He was hoping to find something a little more cost effective. And I was like, scarcity mindset. I've never charged that crazy amount. I'm like, 5K. He's like, oh yeah, done. Signed off. Money sent.
Yep.
And I was like, insane feeling from that. And then I was like, okay, this is real. And then I worked every day for the next like 2 weeks, pretty much like 12-hour days. Just like really making sure this was production ready. And what I did is he gave me like a full, like his version was just everything in one big node, like one big box. And of course that didn't work. AI was overwhelmed. I applied the idea of mind, body, and soul. And I was like, okay, what are we supposed to do here? And it was trying to extract information so people can apply for Medicaid. So I did exactly that. I mapped through, made the conversation tree, learned what Medicaid and Medicare was, figured it out as a Canadian. And then from there, once the information was there, I would send it over to make.com and I'd get a call report, right? And if I wanted to, there's all these sort of upsells about benefit explanation, all this stuff. With voice agents, there's a lot of scope creep because people often don't even know what they want. Often the audit and diagnosis of this kind of stuff requires more of an extensive process. With these guys, it was kind of a one and done. Afterwards, they wanted to basically build a developer like platform internally for this, which I didn't really understand. I tried to I was new to it, so I tried to coast direction. But at the end of the day, more voice agent projects come to the market. Any sort of inbound appointment setting, customer service, being able to actually reactivate and invite guests to events and stuff like that without it sounding robotic, without it sounding pointless.
Exactly. I've never used retail AI. I was about to say, I feel like the human sounding voice is one of the biggest barriers in that. How are you able to achieve that?
So that's using a few tools. There's 11 Labs and another one, giving these guys a free shout out, but Retail and Vapi came out with their own version of it. Essentially, it's a testing and monitoring for voice agents. So what this allows you to do, let's go. Still have an account. They used to be called something else. They renamed themselves. But anyways, what it does is it allows you to basically simulate AI talking to itself. So it would give it an alternative evaluator, and you can run essentially simulations back and forth. Vapi allows you to do this. Retail allows you to do it. Back in the day, they didn't. So this existed. How I also approach it, I look at the 80-20 rule. I feel like depending on the complexity of the conversation, right?
Okay.
How much conversation is actually needed to drive it? Especially, notice when I said customer service, inbound, appointment setting, not sales. If you're trying to actually convert and uncover value and if you're trying to read for signals, that's an organic exercise. I don't think AI is quite there yet. You can possibly train it to that. But I've seen this been used really in the most simplest concept.
For sure.
That Medicare example, I mentioned tons of people of the age of 50 waiting 4 hours. They had a 52% drop off. When I finished this project and delivered to them, they had 76% go through now because immediately somebody picked up and they were nice and they were able to talk through it.
Exactly. So basically, these voices they're built more for the customer support, more for somebody calling in just to get a quick problem solved versus a full sales conversation where you have to persuade, interpret, etc. Amazing. Do you still have to add a very comprehensive knowledge base for what you built in terms of the Medicare, the Medicaid, or was that just a matter of finding PDFs and just putting them in there?
So for the Medicaid specifically, yes, I did have to feed it a knowledge base. Right, I had to give the FAQ, the benefit inquiry, examples of how to collect information. So how to collect a date of birth properly, how to collect zip code properly.
I'm assuming you can use GPT a little bit to help you kind of create those. Yeah.
They all exist in Markdown format. I also, they provided hundreds of transcripts that I was able to also look at. So I fed that through GPT. I'm look for patterns and then.
Love it.
So being able to, one kind of guardrail I put in place is the client 9 times out of 10 has to provide transcripts. They have to provide conversation trees, proof of concept, because otherwise I'm shooting in the dark and conversions are hypothetical.
Yeah, that's a great note just for people to know for sure. So they're not just kind of they're literally just raw dogging it of just no transcripts or calls before his context for sure. That's amazing. And then just to reiterate too, you found this person in the Retail AI Discord in the help support channels.
Just like that. Serendipity, I'd call it.
Yeah.
I didn't know that week I'd be 5K richer.
Literally, that's just like one of those, hard work and preparation meets luck, where it's just like you were in there just naturally exploring, naturally gaining your skill set, enhancing it in new software, being in their Discord. And then I just happened to meet somebody who was looking for somebody who was working on it. So it's just opportunity meets the right time and the right preparation for sure.
Absolutely. Right place, right time. And there's a lot of that. I will say, like, the rising tide raises all boats. There's still such an ocean of people that are discovering voice agents for the first time. People don't even know it exists. So if you can bridge it, I will say one point with voice agents specifically, cost of operating is significantly higher than any other automation project. If you're having, the way I broke it down is like 26 cents for every 100 calls. If you're having a full like VAPI plus, that's like aggregating all the subscription cost essentially.
Yeah. VAPI, Make or something if you're using something else.
Database management, all that stuff. Retail is more expensive than VAPI. However, I will say one, user interface, I just love it so much more. But outside of preference, it is enterprise and SOC 2 compliant. So is VAPI, but it doesn't feel like it personally. I've used VAPI from time. It was one of the first voice agent projects I've done. Yeah, I don't know. When it comes to the actual processing, that difference is very minimal because the voices aren't processed there. This processes conversation trees. Yep. Voice processing is an entirely different thing handled by 11 Labs, Inflection, Sesame. There's all those different groups that handle it. All this platform does is handle the latency between getting a response and pushing one back out.
I love it. Exactly. It's kind of just like monitoring and facilitating that process for sure. And just to go back to your Scala draw, I feel like this is just like a great way to just like show people these two examples of just like you said, the microservices, how now there's this opportunity with a software like Retail, with Make, of being able to do this. Whereas before, if you wanted to custom code a voice assistant, that would require engineers, that would require a full team that needed to be managed, where not one person can deliver that. For sure. So definitely absolutely. So I feel like the time is ripe, and just kind of tie everything together for this full point of there's a hole in the market. There's not enough people fulfilling the demand that these companies, like he was working with, the tax company, this company that needed the voice agent for Medicare, they're willing to pay this $5,000 or willing to pay these between $1,000 to $10,000. And even just to share my screen again really quick, he's breaking down microservices, and he was showing basically, projects he's done, but even just to bring it back to the research side of it. I mean, here's just like other examples of just large companies that essentially, because they have the engineering help, they're able to do larger projects. Like this company called Hatchworks AI, their usual deal size is literally enterprises. So 200 to literally 1 million, but they're kind of doing similar things where they're, just augmenting staff. There's actually probably a better example. Let me see.
Yeah.
Like Plabno's a better example, where essentially, once again, $50,000 to $200,000 deal sizes. And the projects they're doing are kind of similar to microservices, just a tiny bit scaled up, a fintech accounting bot, things like that, where they're charging, $72 an hour with probably 4 people working on it. So they're charging, $46,000. So you could come in, kind of basically offer a similar, if not, 80%, 90% of exactly what they're looking for in terms of the service, but you can offer it at a much better rate because you're either one person or you're 2 people, but you're using those no-code automation platforms. You're using Bolt.new, you're using Make, you're using Supabase. So there's a clear for sure.
2 points I wanted to kind of push back on. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. What would you say to somebody that tells you that small business market is difficult?
I would say, are you talking about difficult because of cost in terms of their ability to not have a budget, or because of competition from other people?
I would say more on it's funny because like for my framework, again, this is a personality piece, I think, but small business excels in terms of sales with more of a consultative approach. I'll frame it like this. Myself, when I wake up as someone who pays the bills through contracts, not by just like potential salary or whatever else, but through achievement of project done, right? The way that I orient my time is based on my routines. So in the same framework, when I'm talking to somebody that is running a service-based business and is juggling 100 things, working 12 to 15-hour days, overwhelmed, not responding maybe a week later, apologizing, feeling bad, having a narrative of themselves that they're unable to actually balance and work with things. How do I help that person without overwhelming them more? That's what I mean by difficult.
Yeah, for sure. That's just a matter of what you were talking about before in terms of like the new skill set, which is auditing, figuring out ROI and then delivering. Because if you understand the exact problem that's going on, if you understand the exact ROI of how to fix it, you have a different type of conviction because you understand that your solution can easily solve that problem and you can deliver multiple solutions to solve that problem. So if you're dealing with that kind of scatterbrain small business owner, it's definitely easier to go into that relationship when you're super convinced and just confident in your offer because you've already done the homework of this is the exact math of how I will take your business from only doing, like you said, 200 calls per week to 600, taking you from being able to have a 50% drop off rate to now dropping that down to 10%. So it's really just a matter of doing that work beforehand of auditing, ROI, understanding the math, and then going into delivery.
Yeah. There's an art to this because this is kind of the that second point as well as kind of like a third workshop in this piece, because when it comes to asking the right questions, it's not just saying it, but that how and who is very, very important because the how and who composes the story. It's the story of who am I and how can I help you? It's the story of like this conversation that is potentially consultative, discovery based. And assuming that I have an approach that you do not have, that I can help you, right? That requires you, if given the chance, in 15 to 30 minutes to achieve what I'm about to share. Usually, if you have an excess of time beyond that, which is very rare if you're actually working with the right people, then if you can get through this place where like, we'll touch upon this, like the champion stuff, you get into this place where like you're speaking and it's just circulating and it's just going. Like you're speaking to them, not with them. And that's the kind of bridge I want to make right here. So when you're talking to them and you're figuring out pain points, you're really uncovering what are they struggling with, right? They say they're overwhelmed. Like, okay, overwhelmed with what? What are you doing? They'll point out a pain point. It's like, I've spent too much time managing Sarah. She just keeps fucking it up. Like she makes these appointments and like, I don't know, like why, because I talk to these people and they're not the greatest. I want to do better on the sales side, but like, it's just hard to find, like good kind of ways to go about it. And he thinks the problem is all out there. It's all Sarah's fault, right? That could be an ego thing. That could be some next stuff. You listening on that audit piece, there's a second train of thought going, which is, okay, so he's spending time managing her without any sort of systems, any sort of playbooks, any sort of like how-tos. She probably feels a little overwhelmed, lost even. She thinks she's actually screwing this up and he's telling her that, so that must be it. The real thing you're trying to ask is like, all right, so you're trying to get qualified. You're trying to basically educate and figure out how can you set these appointments for the business in a way where somebody will actually show up and they're actually high quality, interest, high urgency. That's the problem you're trying to solve. So you can approach this in a few ways. Two forks in the road. One, if you're brave and confident with numbers, this is the route I would recommend you on. If you're more of like, this is new territory for me, the second one is the easier route. It kind of gets you to the same place. The first one is, how much time does this cost you, right? Say Sarah's getting paid $50K a year. And this owner, let's take the example of a marketing agency, right? I actually talked to a guy like this where he has his wife and his wife's sister pretty much running a marketing company for like 10 clients. So it's a small team, 3 people, and 50K, and God knows what the founder gets. But let's assume, for sake of example, 50K is the salary. How much time does Sarah spend setting appointments? She's doing what, out of her 8-hour shift, maybe an hour or 2 actually calling and like, trying to book people. Then that's like what? Pull up in a calculator here. Let's go. Let's say 50K is 25 an hour times, let's say 10 hours a week. And then times that by 4 weeks, assuming that's a month. Spends a solid $1,000 on just that time sink, right? That's one way to calculate it. The other approach is saying, if I were to basically help them, give them qualified leads, that would be worth, you'd assume, around that $1,000 mark. What if you could do 800 and you charge 10 to 20% on any net new revenue that you bring them? So say they get an appointment set, I didn't mean to do that. Someone actually buys, one of those appointments go through, right? And they net an additional 2,000. So you'd collect what? 20% on that 2,000. It's 200. You would have made your 1,000. That's on every recurring deal. So say now, instead of, she's setting appointments, she set 5 of them that converted. That's 2,000 times 5. So because of you now giving her qualified people to call, instead of her generating $1,000 in new business, she can generate 10, right? Again, assume that they're not overloaded, that they actually can fulfill. So now 20% of that, 2,000, right? So you start to kind of make your difference. You start to kind of see how this plans out. Yeah, 2,000. So your job is to look at, what can I implement that will get rid of this time sink and make it worthwhile for them. So that's the kind of second piece, is like looking at like, all right, what systems already exist? Like without having to do all that math with them, you could, if it'll comfort them, it'll comfort you. You could just go right to being like, okay, so if I can get you an enriched lead gen system, that would be useful to you, right? Are you open to doing a reduced setup fee percentage of the net new revenue? I can break down the math for you. They say yes, they say no. You can take a route. You can tell them you won't charge them more than 30% of what it's currently costing them. So then you can say 10 to 20% of net new revenue. I know I danced a little bit there, but to reiterate that in a soundbite. If you are making a business money, you are allowed to charge them a percentage of that net new revenue, right? Given you have established a relationship, you've established trust, you may have even delivered projects for them already. This is where there's the most return for an automation specialist, a citizen developer, is actually transforming a business and hedging. I mean, you'll take the, reduced setup fee, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be at 800. You can do the 5K, you can do the 2K. A lot of deal sizes on Upwork, which we'll get into, is around that $1,500 mark on average. So you can get a $1,500 setup fee and build something that will actually help the business and say, hey, when this performs well, and here's the numbers of how we're going to track that, because you'll be able to see the full pipe. This is the percentage that makes sense. And that's the kind of pitch.
Yeah,
I love a lot there. How did that kind of chew?
No, it's great. I think it's important for people to see, like, this is kind of the audit process and the ROI process of understanding what task they're currently not happy with, why they want to solve it, and how you can kind of supercharge it with the microservice that you build, for sure. And then also the next episode, and also people just comment, we can link them to something on Notion or just give it to them. Pricing is something where it's, of course, project dependent in terms of like, what can that client afford, but also is business dependent. It's entrepreneur dependent. What are your, essentially your expenses that you're paying for? Not like life expenses, but like, are you using N8N? Are you using Make? Are you using retail? Like, what are those software subscription expenses? Putting those into that pricing is important too. So if anybody wants us like a more comprehensive and robust pricing calculator, we definitely have that available for you, so you can understand like, what is my true hourly rate? It's not just dependent on, what that client feels subjectively you deserve. It's actually truly based on like how much it costs for you to fulfill that, based on software costs, your own labor costs, and then just whatever else you want to layer inside of that. So if anybody wants access to it, just let us know in the comments for sure.
Yeah. And if you're a noble engineer like myself that would just say yes to every project coming my way, that's great for learning. That's fantastic. When you actually want to start making money, it's important to only say yes to things that don't take up 12 hours a day. You don't want to build the moon for pennies, essentially.
Exactly. You don't want to be stuck in a project where you're essentially not compensated enough. So you have to pull from other projects to, pay your life expenses and things like that. That's how a lot of businesses that handle larger project sizes actually end up going bankrupt. It's because they don't have the correct cash flow and they're pulling from future projects, try to manage a current one. So like you said, like that retail AI can get expensive. So if you're not prepared for that, if you're not charging for that, you can kind of get lost in the shuffle for sure.
Yeah, and the last thing you want to do is a client that wakes up with like a $900 bill that he didn't expect.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
But that's the key point too, is like that 900 bill should have also converted into 5 new appointments that he would not have had. And out of those 5, 3, because you're so hands-on with the nurturing and the sales infrastructure, and like you're such a killer resource that you're making sure those appointments convert and is making the business money. You show that notoriety and that worthwhile investment. He'll happily pay you 900 if he made 3,000 off of it. That's the goal. Make people more money than you make yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, do you have one last point? I got to leave soon, but just if you want to make a few more points, let me know.
Which we'll touch upon next week is the Upwork side of things and how this works in real time. So at the beginning of that next piece, I'll revisit the faculty of mind and really showcase how this impacts. But I really hope you guys see from this episode where the intent behind this comes. A lot of people hear what we do and they think it's a displacement. They're like, oh, you're the one with AI ruining the world. My sister was like, you're the problem. And I'm like, well, my hope here is to fix that problem, because companies are ignorant and teams and managers that have barely touched ChatGPT are like, yeah, I can do everything. And then they fire a team and then they're behind on reports because they don't know how to auto create a proposal generator. So my aim is to put those tools in the hands of people that are overwhelmed and that can get speed and efficiency out of the day. And so they can go home after an 8-hour shift and be there with their family and their people and not be worried. That's my goal.
Absolutely. I love it. So yeah, next episode, just so I can share my screen and just show us a quick sneak peek real quick. Basically, we know this was a lot of great information, just a lot of theory on understanding thinking frameworks, playbooks, etc., but also some technical stuff too. Next episode, we're just going to go, very, very deep into just like landing clients, outreach, Upwork, etc. A big one is going to be org charts. So when we say that, we literally mean like if you're reaching out to a company, knowing the organizational hierarchy so you can understand who can champion you into that company with your offer. So that'll be a really big part of the next episode. And then also Jonathan has a killer way that he does Upwork outreach. So we're definitely going to go into that next week too. But other than that, been a great episode. If you guys have any questions, let us know in the comments, and everything I showed in terms of the Upwork scrape jobs and those competitor intel, that the link to that is in the description. And obviously if you guys need help building voice agents, reach out to Jonathan or any other automations for sure.
Oh yeah, we're here to crush it. I hope you guys got a lot out of this. I'm really excited. Like, this is the first time I'm ever sharing any material like this. Like I mentioned, I've been doing live workshops because my biggest thing is if I'm going to broadcast this to a larger audience, I crave utility out of it. So the last thing I want to do is give you guys some noise that you've already heard. I'm trying to give you some songs and some music you can dance to. So yeah, let's keep singing. I'm super excited for this.